The galaxy had always looked down on humanity, dismissing them as primitive, chaotic, and unworthy of attention among the great interstellar civilizations that ruled the stars with iron fleets and ancient knowledge. The Council of the most powerful species, known as the Concord, often spoke of humans with disdain, labeling them as insignificant pests in meetings where decisions about war, trade, and alliances were made. Yet none of them ever considered that humans, while appearing fragile, had an unpredictable quality that no other species could measure or understand. On Earth, humans lived simple lives, struggling with politics, technology, and natural disasters, yet in that apparent chaos lay a resourcefulness, a determination, and an instinct for survival that had allowed humanity to endure every catastrophe for centuries, from the slow erosion of ecosystems to devastating wars among themselves. Humans adapted, innovated, and endured, and this resilience, though unnoticed by the Galactic elite, was a foundation for something far greater. The first contact between humanity and the galactic powers had been a disaster for human pride, but an opportunity for learning. The scouts that had been sent into interstellar space returned with stories of vast empires, incredible ships, weapons that could annihilate planets, and civilizations that had existed for millions of years. These reports were met with laughter by the Council when humans proposed trade agreements or diplomatic missions. They were told that humans could barely maintain their own planet, yet here they were, claiming to reach the stars and participating in galactic diplomacy. The human leaders, both political and military, knew that respect would not be given freely. It had to be earned through action, but what form that action would take remained uncertain until the Council made its first mistake, in a demonstration meant to intimidate humans. A fleet from the dominant species of the Concord arrived in the Sol system, massive ships, hundreds of kilometers long, their weapons capable of melting continents, their commanders expecting fear, compliance, or at least a measure of panic from the inhabitants of Earth. Instead, what they encountered was calm preparation. Humanity mobilized its planetary defenses with precision, rapid deployment of orbital satellites, automated drones, and experimental energy shields that had been quietly developed in secret for decades. The aliens were baffled there. Communication channels filled with incredulous chatter as humans launched countermeasures that disrupted scanning, interfered with targeting systems, and obscured the approach of conventional fleets. While the Concord viewed humans as unpredictable and weak, humans had spent years studying the techniques and technologies of other species, reverse engineering what little information they could gather, integrating it with their own ingenuity, and creating weapons and strategies that no alien had anticipated. Humanity's fleets were small compared to the Concord, but they were fast, intelligent, and adaptive. Each ship operated semi-autonomously, using artificial intelligence designed to learn from every engagement and adjust tactics instantaneously. When the aliens fired the first salvo intended to destroy major cities, it was intercepted by energy grids that diffused the blast, while humans responded with targeted strikes on supply lines, communication relays, and command centers, creating confusion and delays among the alien commanders who had assumed they would face minimal resistance. On Earth, military leaders such as Admiral Rebecca Shaw and General Marcus Hayes coordinated defenses from underground command centers, using a combination of old-world strategy and modern technology. They anticipated every move the aliens made, forcing them into positions that humans had pre-calculated through simulations. While on the diplomatic front, Ambassador Daniel Kim monitored communications, understanding that showing intelligence, calm, and control could unsettle species that had long relied on fear to command obedience. The aliens, who prided themselves on their advanced technology and millennia of experience, began to realize that humanity was not merely surviving. They were adapting, improving, and countering in ways that no database could have predicted. Humans exploited weaknesses in alien psychology, understanding that overconfidence led to mistakes. They baited fleets into traps, manipulated supply routes, and used misdirection to create opportunities for precision strikes. The first significant battle in orbit over Mars became a turning point. The aliens launched a massive attack intending to cripple human shipyards and infrastructure, yet humans had anticipated the assault, evacuating critical assets while drawing the alien fleet into an ambush near the asteroid belt. Their small, fast human ships attacked from multiple angles, targeting engines, weapons, and communication arrays. The aliens had underestimated the humans' coordination. their ability to operate in near-zero visibility, and their innovative approach to space combat. The destruction of the lead alien dreadnought shocked the Concorde, broadcast across their networks, proving that humans could not be ignored. As months passed, humans continued to push their boundaries, converting commercial satellites into tactical platforms, deploying autonomous drones in swarms that outmaneuvered much larger alien ships, and establishing forward bases in asteroid fields and distant moons that served as staging points for both defense and counterattack. Every engagement taught humans more, and with each victory, their confidence and capabilities grew exponentially. While the Council watched, disbelief turned into concern, and concern into fear. They had dismissed humans as weak, chaotic, and unworthy of strategic consideration. Yet the humans, who had endured famine, plague, and war on their own planet, now demonstrated resilience and ingenuity on a galactic scale. The first communication from the Concorde acknowledging human capabilities was terse and filled with reluctant respect. Yet even then, they attempted to negotiate from a position of assumed superiority, sending envoys who spoke of treaties and containment, offering false concessions while attempting to control human expansion. The humans, however, recognized deception and responded with measured counter-diplomacy, showing respect but asserting their sovereignty and demonstrating that any attempt to control or limit humanity would be met with strategic, technological, and tactical opposition. The alien species underestimated human adaptability, a trait forged through millennia of struggle in the desert of Africa, the forests of South America, and the frozen poles. Humans had survived environments that would have destroyed other species, and this resilience now manifested in space. When the aliens attempted a coordinated strike across multiple human colonies, the humans used deception, misinformation, and rapid deployment of countermeasures to isolate each attack, responded with overwhelming force precisely where needed. Alien fleets were fragmented, their command chains disrupted, and their morale shattered. The Concorde realized that humans were not just a military threat. They were unpredictable, capable of thinking in ways that defied standard logic. Humans exploited their emotions, instincts, and collective will in battle, creating opportunities that no simulation could predict. On one forward outpost orbiting Jupiter, human scientists had developed a prototype weapon capable of emitting energy pulses that disrupted alien propulsion systems without harming civilians. This allowed human forces to immobilize enemy ships and neutralize threats without escalating conflicts unnecessarily. The alien commanders could not understand technology nor the strategy. They were forced to retreat in disarray. The propaganda of the Concorde, which had always depicted humans as primitive and weak, began to crumble as reports of victories, innovations, and tactical brilliance reached every corner of the galaxy. The humans did not seek revenge for slights or insults. They did not attack indiscriminately, but when provoked, they responded with precision, decisiveness, and overwhelming force, turning every perceived disadvantage into a strategic advantage. In the council chambers, species that had once laughed at humanity argued fiercely about containment, retaliation, or alliance. Yet every proposed plan failed to account for humans' ability to adapt, innovate, and anticipate. Human diplomacy, when it occurred, was calm, respectful, and unyielding. Every interaction with the Concorde became a subtle test, with humans quietly probing weaknesses, learning languages, understanding cultural norms, and finding cracks in the seemingly perfect alien structures. Through this combination of strategy, technology, and psychological insight, humans began to establish a reputation that was impossible to ignore, one of unpredictability, resilience, and latent power on Earth. The political leadership, military commanders, scientists, and engineers worked tirelessly, often through exhaustion and personal sacrifice. Yet the cohesion of human society, forged through centuries of struggle and cooperation, became their greatest advantage. The aliens, by contrast, were fragmented by arrogance, tradition, and the inflexibility of ancient hierarchies. When humans finally launched their first large-scale offensive beyond the Sol system, targeting key alien resource hubs and communication arrays, the speed, coordination, and ingenuity of the operation stunned even the most experienced commanders. Human pilots performed maneuvers that had no precedent, using gravitational fields, asteroid cover, and electronic warfare to maximize efficiency and minimize risk, while human fleets, though small in number, operated with extraordinary precision. targeting critical nodes rather than engaging in wasteful battles. The aliens suffered catastrophic losses, some of their largest vessels destroyed or stranded without propulsion. And for the first time, the Concord considered the possibility that humans might not only survive in the galaxy but dominate it. The psychological impact was profound. Species that had considered humans insignificant began to experience fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of intelligence, creativity, and resilience that could not be measured by technology or numbers alone. Humanity's reputation spread rapidly, not through boasting or propaganda, but through undeniable results. Every strategic victory, every demonstration of ingenuity, every act of survival against overwhelming odds added to a legend that grew with every engagement. Humans had been mocked, dismissed, and underestimated. Yet in every encounter, they revealed hidden strength, tactical brilliance, and a capacity for action that the most advanced civilizations had not predicted. The galaxy began to understand that humans were not to be trifled with, that underestimation was lethal, and that every decision regarding humanity had to be made with caution, careful calculation, and respect. On the frontier worlds, human colonies thrived, combining old-world knowledge with new technologies, creating self-sufficient bases that could withstand sieges, supply disruptions, and direct assault. These colonies became hubs for further expansion, research, and defense. The Concord's fleets were spread thin, unable to predict human movements, while humans, with fewer resources, achieved greater impact. The contrast highlighted the difference between rigid superiority and adaptive brilliance. In battles spanning star systems, humans demonstrated coordinated strikes that integrated orbital bombardment, cyber warfare, reconnaissance drones, and precision sabotage. Alien commanders were forced to revise long-standing doctrines, realizing that human unpredictability rendered traditional strategies ineffective. Even when humans suffered losses, they converted setbacks into lessons, immediately adapting tactics to prevent repetition of mistakes. The cumulative effect of these actions was that humans not only survived but turned the momentum of conflict in their favor. Their reputation grew, reaching even species that had never directly encountered them. Whispers of humanity's abilities spread across trade routes, scientific communities, and diplomatic channels, altering perceptions before direct contact occurred. By the time the Concord formally recognized humans as a major galactic power, the narrative had shifted entirely. Humans were no longer seen as primitive, chaotic, or insignificant. They were recognized as strategic, resilient, and capable of reshaping the balance of power. Every alien civilization that had once mocked them now approached with caution, and in some cases fear. Humanity had been underestimated, laughed at, and dismissed, yet the combination of survival instinct, innovation, adaptability, and moral resolve had allowed them to rise from a single blue planet to a force that could influence the fate of the galaxy. The very mocking words once used against them now fueled further innovation. The humans learned from every slight, every insult, and every challenge, turning ridicule into strategy, disrespect into motivation, and disbelief into proof of their true capabilities. As humans prepared for the next stage of expansion, the Concord struggled to adjust, some leaders advocating negotiation, others demanding containment. Yet every plan failed to consider the most important factor: the humans' ability to unite diverse populations, integrate technology and tactics, and act with foresight and determination that no alien culture could fully comprehend. In countless skirmishes, ambushes, and battles across multiple systems, humans displayed patience, intelligence, and precision, exploiting every weakness, adapting to new challenges, and using their environment creatively, turning deserts, asteroids, gas giants, and orbital debris into tactical advantages. Alien forces suffered heavy losses, often without fully understanding why. Humans demonstrated not just technological superiority, but psychological insight, using strategy that accounted for both the limitations and assumptions of their enemies. Slowly, the galaxy began to acknowledge a new reality. Humanity, once mocked and dismissed, had become a power that could not be ignored, underestimated, or defeated easily. They had revealed their true power, and the Concord, along with countless other species, now face a humbling truth that would reshape interstellar history forever. The shockwaves from humanity's early victories spread faster than any official report, carried by frightened merchants, intercepted transmissions, and the uneasy silence of defeated fleets. And within the Concord, Debates turned heated as ancient species struggled to understand how a civilization so young had dismantled doctrines refined over millennia. Many leaders insisted the losses were anomalies caused by reckless commanders, while others warned that humanity represented a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Yet arrogance still outweighed caution, and the Council authorized a decisive campaign meant to end the human problem permanently, assembling a coalition armada larger than any previously deployed against a single species. Its objective simple and brutal: break human resistance, occupy their core systems, and remind the galaxy of the Concord's dominance. Human intelligence networks detected the buildup weeks before the First Fleet moved, not through superior sensors but through pattern recognition, trade irregularities, and subtle changes in alien logistics that human analysts had learned to notice. Admiral Rebecca Shaw convened senior commanders and civilian leaders, presenting a calm assessment that left no room for panic. Humanity could not match the coalition ship for ship, but they did not need to. Their strength lay in preparation, deception, and the ability to turn the enemy's expectations against them across human-controlled space. Colonies shifted into contingency mode, not with chaos, but with disciplined efficiency. Civilian traffic rerouted, production lines repurposed, and research facilities accelerated projects that had once seemed theoretical. General Marcus Hayes coordinated planetary defenses, emphasizing layer resistance rather than fixed positions, knowing that flexibility would be the key to survival, while Ambassador Daniel Kim maintained open diplomatic channels, projecting confidence and restraint, ensuring the galaxy saw humans as rational actors rather than reckless aggressors. As the coalition armada advanced, its commanders expected terror, surrender, or desperate resistance. Instead, they encountered silence. Human fleets appeared to retreat, abandoning forward positions and leaving behind systems that seemed undefended. This apparent weakness reinforced alien assumptions, drawing them deeper into human territory, unaware that every movement was tracked, every formation analyzed, and every assumption exploited. The first major engagement occurred near a sparsely populated system chosen deliberately for gravitational complexity. As the coalition fleets entered, their formations disrupted by unexpected interference. Human forces emerged not as a single armada, but as coordinated strike groups attacking from multiple vectors, using the system's natural hazards to limit enemy maneuverability. Alien ships collided, shields overloaded, and command networks faltered under electronic attacks designed not to destroy but confuse, delay, and isolate. Human pilots executed precise strikes, disabling propulsion and weapons before withdrawing, refusing to commit to prolonged engagements, forcing the coalition to advance cautiously, bleeding resources with every step. Frustration mounted among alien commanders, and used enemies who refused decisive battles, and their internal disagreements slowed response times further. Humans exploited this hesitation, launching raids on supply depots and relay stations far behind the front lines, using small, fast vessels crewed by veterans who understood that survival depended on discipline and trust. These raids had outsized effects, stranding fleets without fuel or coordination, forcing commanders to choose between pressing forward or retreating to regroup. On Earth and its colonies, the population endured rationing, long hours, and constant uncertainty. Yet morale remained high, not because of propaganda, but because people understood the stakes and trusted the leadership guiding them. Scientists worked alongside engineers and soldiers, sharing data freely, improving systems in real time based on battlefield feedback. Every loss was analyzed, every success refined, creating a feedback loop that accelerated human adaptation far beyond alien expectations. Within the Concord, reports of mounting losses triggered panic among lesser member species. Some quietly withdrew support, citing internal security concerns, while others demanded harsher measures, including the use of planet-killing weapons, a proposal that revealed deep fractures within the alliance. Humanity seized on these divisions, leaking selective information that exacerbated mistrust, making it appear as though certain species were withholding support or sabotaging operations. Paranoia spread, slowing decision-making and weakening cohesion. The coalition's advance stalled, and in that pause, humans launched their most daring operation yet, a coordinated strike on a major Concord shipyard located deep within what was thought to be secure territory. The operation relied on deception, using capture transponder codes and false distress signals to bypass defenses. Once inside, human forces targeted key infrastructure with surgical precision, avoiding civilian casualties while crippling production capacity. The psychological impact was devastating. The Concord had believed its core worlds untouchable, yet humans had reached them with limited forces and escaped largely intact. Confidence within the Alliance shattered, and fear took its place. Alien populations began to question their leaders, demanding explanations for losses against a species once dismissed as irrelevant. Humanity, meanwhile, did not celebrate openly. Leadership emphasized caution, knowing that desperation could drive the Concord to reckless escalation. Defenses were reinforced, contingency plans updated, and diplomatic channels expanded, offering ceasefires and negotiations not from weakness, but from strength, presenting humanity as a stabilizing force rather than a threat. Some neutral species began to view humans as potential allies, impressed by their restraint and strategic clarity. Trade routes shifted, information flowed more freely toward human space, and the balance of influence subtly changed on the battlefield. Human commanders continued to avoid decisive confrontations, instead applying constant pressure, forcing the coalition to expend resources and morale without achieving clear victories. Alien fleets, designed for overwhelming force, struggled against an enemy that fought like water, yielding, adapting, and striking where least expected. As months turned into a year, the coalition's losses became unsustainable, and its political unity fractured. Some species withdrew entirely, others sought separate peace talks, leaving the remaining forces stretched thin and increasingly isolated. Humanity prepared for the next phase, aware that survival had already transformed into something more significant. They were no longer merely defending themselves. They were shaping the future structure of galactic power, and the galaxy, watching closely, began to understand that the age of dismissing humanity was over, not because humans sought dominance for its own sake, but because they had proven that intelligence, adaptability, and unity could overcome even the oldest and most powerful empires, setting the stage for a confrontation that would force the Concord to confront its greatest failure, underestimating a species that refused to break. As the coalition fractured under the strain of prolonged conflict, the Concord attempted to reassert control through authority rather than strategy, issuing rigid directives that ignored battlefield realities, and this only deepened the gap between command and execution, while humanity observed patiently, understanding that empires often defeated themselves long before the final blow was struck. Within human command circles, discussions shifted from survival to shaping outcomes. Admiral Rebecca Shaw emphasized that the coming phase would define how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations, not merely as warriors but as architects of stability. And this perspective guided every decision that followed. Human fleets began operating farther from Sol, not as invaders, but as enforcers of order where Concord authority had collapsed, escorting civilian convoys, suppressing piracy, and reopening trade lanes abandoned during the fighting. These actions were deliberate signals, demonstrating capability without cruelty, strength without excess, and they resonated across neutral systems where populations had suffered under rigid alien hierarchies. Meanwhile, the remaining hardline Concord factions launched a final coordinated offensive aimed at Earth itself, believing that a symbolic strike could still shatter human resolve. Intelligence detected the plan early, not through superior sensors, but through behavioral analysis of alien communications that revealed desperation masked as confidence. General Marcus Hayes oversaw the defense of Earth with calm precision, dispersing assets, hardening infrastructure, and preparing layer responses that assumed initial losses but guaranteed long-term control. When the attacking fleets arrived, they encountered defenses unlike anything they had faced, not a single shield or weapon, but overlapping systems designed to absorb, redirect, and exhaust enemy fire. Human ships did not rush forward. Instead, they waited, forcing the attackers to commit fully before revealing countermeasures. Alien weapons drained power into adaptive fields that converted excess energy into usable reserves, while autonomous platforms swarmed around larger vessels, disabling them piece by piece. The battle unfolded over days rather than hours, grinding down the attackers' morale as much as their hardware. Alien commanders issued increasingly contradictory orders as human forces exploited every hesitation, striking command ships and leaving subordinates leaderless. When the last major Concord vessel withdrew from Earth orbit, damaged, and disorganized, the psychological impact was immediate and irreversible. The idea that Earth could not be taken, even by the combined might of ancient empires, spread rapidly, triggering political collapse within the Concord. Member species began openly defying council directives, prioritizing local security over distant authority. Humanity responded not with conquest, but with diplomacy backed by unmistakable strength. Ambassador Daniel Kim led negotiations that offer protection, trade, and autonomy to systems willing to disengage from aggressive policies. These agreements were carefully structured, respecting cultural differences while establishing clear mutual defense principles, and they proved attractive to worlds exhausted by centuries of rigid control. As the Concord's influence waned, humanity's network of allies expanded, bound not by fear, but by shared interest and demonstrated reliability. Internally, humans grappled with the weight of their new role. Debates arose about limits, responsibility, and the risk of becoming what they had opposed. Yet the memory of being mocked and dismissed served as a grounding force, reminding leaders why restraint mattered, why power had to be paired with accountability. On distant fronts, isolated Concord fleets attempted guerrilla resistance, but they found little support among local populations who had already seen the benefits of human-led stability. These holdouts were contained through patience rather than annihilation, cut off from resources and gradually neutralized, each resolution reinforcing perception that humanity was not an occupying force, but corrective one, reshaping systems without erasing identities. As years passed, the galaxy adjusted to a new reality, one where ancient hierarchies no longer dictated destiny, and adaptability mattered more than age or size. Human institutions evolved rapidly to meet this responsibility, integrating alien advisors, sharing technology selectively, and establishing forums where disputes were resolved through negotiation backed by credible enforcement. The Concord, once the unquestioned authority of the stars, existed only as a fragmented shadow of its former self. Its remaining leaders forced to confront the truth that arrogance had been their undoing. They had mocked humanity for its youth, its internal conflicts, its apparent disorder. Never, realizing that those very traits had forged a species capable of rapid learning, creative problem-solving, and unity under pressure, humanity's true power had never been a single weapon or fleet, but the ability to adapt faster than any opponent, to endure setbacks without losing purpose, and to wield strength with intention rather than impulse. And as the galaxy entered this uncertain but hopeful era, one lesson echoed across worlds both familiar and strange. Humanity had been underestimated once, and no civilization would make that mistake again. In the aftermath of the Concord's collapse, the galaxy entered a period of unstable calm, a silence filled not with peace but with uncertainty, as systems long controlled by rigid authority struggled to redefine themselves, and humanity found itself at the center of this transformation, whether it wished to be or not. Human leaders understood that victory in war meant little if it led to chaos afterward. So they shifted focus toward consolidation, stabilization, and long-term balance. Admiral Rebecca Shaw stepped down from frontline command to oversee the creation of a unified defense framework that included both human and allied fleets, designed not for expansion, but for rapid response against emerging threats, piracy, or remnants of the old order. General Marcus Hayes worked closely with colonial governors to standardize defense protocols while allowing local adaptation, ensuring that no world felt dominated by distant authority. This balance between structure and flexibility became a defining feature of human influence. Alien worlds that had once lived under strict Concord rule experienced something unfamiliar: the freedom to govern themselves while benefiting from shared security and trade. This shift was not seamless. Disputes erupted, old rivalries resurfaced, and some systems tested human resolve, believing restraint to be weakness. In response, humanity demonstrated firmness without cruelty, intervening decisively when lines were crossed, then withdrawing. Authority once stability was restored, reinforcing the idea that power was responsibility, not a privilege. Meanwhile, human scientists and engineers collaborated with alien counterparts, unlocking technologies that neither could have developed alone. Breakthroughs in energy generation, propulsion, and medical science spread rapidly, improving quality of life across dozens of systems. These advancements further cemented humanity's reputation, not just as warriors, but as builders. Yet not all threats came from outside. within human society. Voices rose questioning the cost of leadership, the strain on resources, and the risk of cultural dilution. Political debates grew intense, but unlike the rigid councils of old, human governance absorbed dissent, adapted policies, and evolved, turning internal conflict into refinement rather than fracture. This adaptability continued to unsettle alien observers who struggled to understand how a species could argue so fiercely yet act so decisively when unity was required. On the fringes of known space, remnants of the Concord began to regroup, not as a unified force, but as scattered warlords clinging to old ideologies. They preyed on vulnerable systems, hoping to reignite fear and reclaim relevance. Humanity responded by empowering local defenses rather than imposing direct control, training crews, sharing intelligence, and establishing rapid response corridors that allowed allies to defend themselves effectively. This strategy deprived the warlords of easy targets and support, slowly eroding their influence as decades passed. Children grew up across the galaxy knowing a reality where humanity was a central pillar of order, not through domination but through presence. Stories spread of how humans had once been mocked, dismissed as insignificant, and how that arrogance had nearly doomed the old empires. These stories became cautionary lessons taught in academies and command schools, emphasizing humility, adaptability, and respect for the unknown. Humanity's journey from underestimated outsider to stabilizing force reshaped galactic culture itself. Exploration resumed with renewed purpose. Joint expeditions pushed beyond known boundaries, and first contact protocols were rewritten to avoid the mistakes of the past. Every new species encounter was approached with caution and curiosity rather than contempt. The memory of how easily arrogance had led to catastrophe remained fresh, and humanity insisted on this lesson being preserved. By the time the last significant Concord stronghold surrendered peacefully, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Power was no longer centralized in ancient councils, but distributed among networks of cooperation. At the heart of it all stood humanity, not as rulers of stars, but as proof that resilience, adaptability, and unity could overcome even the greatest odds. The mocking laughter that once echoed through council chambers had faded into history, replaced by a sober understanding shared across worlds. Humanity's true power had never been hidden technology or secret weapons alone, but the capacity to grow, to learn, and to rise when underestimated, a lesson written not in words, but in the fate of an entire galaxy reshaped by those who had once been dismissed as nothing more than a minor, forgettable species. As stability took root across the former Concord territories, a new challenge emerged that tested humanity in ways war never had. The challenge of endurance, of sustaining cooperation among species with vastly different histories, instincts, and fears, and it became clear that victory on the battlefield had only opened the door to a far more complex struggle, maintaining trust, preventing stagnation, and ensuring that power never hardened into the same arrogance that had once ruled the stars. Human leadership responded by decentralizing authority further, creating regional compacts that allowed systems to manage their own affairs while committing to share principles of defense, transparency, and mutual aid. These compacts were not imposed but negotiated, often slowly and painfully, yet the process itself built legitimacy. Humans listened more than they spoke, a habit that surprised alien delegates accustomed to dominance or submission, and this willingness to adapt policy to context strengthened alliances far more effectively than fear ever had. Admiral Rebecca Shaw, now serving in an advisor capacity, warned repeatedly that complacency would be the greatest enemy, reminding councils that history favored those who prepared for unseen threats, not those who celebrated past victories. Her warnings proved timely when unexplained disturbances began appearing along the outer reaches of mapped space, entire systems experiencing sudden communication blackouts, navigation failures, and energy fluctuations that did not match any known technology. Initial reports were dismissed by some as technical errors or local conflicts, but human analysts noticed patterns, subtle but consistent, indicating an intelligence operating beyond known galactic norms. Rather than hiding this information, humanity shared it openly, convening emergency summits that included even former adversaries, reinforcing the principle that survival depended on collective awareness. Joint reconnaissance missions were launched, combining human adaptability with alien sensory technologies, and what they discovered unsettled everyone involved. Remnants of an ancient machine civilization long thought extinct, awakening slowly after eons of dormancy. Its systems designed not for conquest, but for correction, eliminating what it classified as destabilizing anomalies. Early scans suggested that humanity's rapid rise and restructuring of galactic order had triggered these systems, marking humans not as enemies, but as variables too unpredictable to ignore. Fear rippled through allied systems. Some voices argued that humanity should withdraw, reduce its influence, or even sacrifice itself to avoid provoking annihilation. Yet human leaders rejected these ideas calmly but firmly, understanding that retreat would only validate the machine logic that adaptability was a threat to be erased. Instead, they prepared to confront the new challenge with the same principles that had carried them this far: cooperation, transparency, and relentless learning. Research teams worked day and night to understand the ancient technology, not to copy it blindly, but to comprehend its underlying logic, while fleets repositioned defensively, avoiding provocation while remaining ready. When the first machine probes entered inhabited space, they were met not with immediate destruction, but with controlled engagement. Humans tested responses, learned limitations, and adjusted tactics rapidly, discovering that the machines struggled against unpredictability. Their algorithms optimized for static patterns and rigid hierarchies, a weakness humanity had exploited before in organic empires. Using decentralized command structures, adaptive tactics, and mixed-species crews, human-led forces disrupted machine operations without escalating into total war. Buying time to refine understanding, diplomatic efforts were attempted even here, not out of optimism but necessity, sending mathematical and conceptual signals designed to communicate intent, restraint, and willingness to coexist. Though responses were minimal, the effort itself unified the galaxy, reinforcing humanity's role as coordinator rather than commander. As tension mounted, humanity once again found itself at a crossroads, not mocked this time, but watched closely. Every decision scrutinized by allies and former enemies alike. The question was no longer whether humans were strong enough, but whether they were wise enough to wield that strength of the universe that responded harshly to imbalance. And as preparations continued, one truth became clear to all who observed: humanity's true power was not a moment of triumph, but a continuing process of adaptation, one that would be tested again and again as long as the stars endured. The appearance of the ancient machine entities forced the galaxy to confront a kind of threat no living civilization had ever truly understood, one that did not negotiate from fear or pride, but from cold assessment. And humanity quickly realized that traditional displays of force would only reinforce the machine's conclusion that organic life was inherently destabilizing. So human strategy shifted toward controlled resistance paired with deliberate unpredictability, a paradox that confused even allied commanders at first. Fleets were reorganized into modular groups capable of independent action, each operating under broad intent rather than fixed orders, ensuring that no single pattern could be identified or optimized against. Human scientists worked alongside alien mathematicians and cognitive theorists to model machine decision pathways, not to defeat them outright, but to create uncertainty within their calculations. This approach frustrated species accustomed to decisive battles, yet results soon became evident. Machine incursion slowed, probes hesitated, and response times increased as algorithms struggled to resolve inconsistent data. On several frontier worlds, machine construct attempted to enforce containment, only to be met by civilian evacuation protocols and nonviolent interference that denied them clear targets. These encounters demonstrated that humanity's strength extended beyond military capability into societal coordination, the ability of billions to act coherently without centralized coercion, a trait the machines had not anticipated. Within the human-led councils, debates grew intense over escalation risks. Some argued for preemptive strikes to cripple machine hubs, while others warned that such actions could validate the machine's core assumptions. Ultimately, a measured path was chosen: limited engagements designed to protect inhabited systems, while continuing attempts at conceptual communication, using shared constants of physics and logic to frame coexistence as a stable outcome. During one such exchange near a dead star system, human analysts detected a shift in machine behavior, a subtle reclassification of humanity from anomaly to conditional variable. It was not peace, but it was no longer immediate eradication. This change rippled through machine operations, reducing the intensity of incursions and creating space for further analysis. The galaxy watched closely, many realizing for the first time that Humanity's greatest contribution was not victory, but time. Time bought through patience, adaptability, and refusal to conform to expected roles. Former Concord species, once rigid and hierarchical, began adopting similar decentralized approaches, reshaping their societies under human guidance without losing cultural identity. This diffusion of adaptability further complicated machine assessments, turning the galaxy itself into a dynamic system too complex to simplify or eliminate. Over years of careful maneuvering, machine activity stabilized into predictable boundaries, dangerous but manageable, and the immediate threat of extinction faded. Humanity did not declare triumph. Instead, it institutionalized vigilance, embedding adaptability into education, governance, and defense planning, ensuring future generations understood that strength was never permanent, only maintained through awareness and growth. As trust deepened among allied systems, humanity's earlier history of being mocked and dismissed became a foundational narrative, a reminder how easily arrogance could blind even the most advanced minds. The machines, observing this evolving order, adjusted their parameters further, gradually disengaging from aggressive correction and shifting into long-term observation. The galaxy entered a fragile equilibrium, one shaped not by domination, but by the recognition that unpredictability, when guided by restraint, could be a stabilizing force rather than a threat. And at the center of this balance stood humanity, no longer underestimated, no longer mocked, but understood as a species that turned adversity into structure and chaos into opportunity, a role that carried immense responsibility, and one that humanity accepted with quiet determination, knowing that the future would bring challenges yet unseen, and that their true power would be measured not by the enemies they defeated, but by the order they preserved. As the fragile equilibrium with the machine entities settled into something resembling stability, the galaxy began to feel the long-term consequences of humanity's rise in subtler but deeper ways, no longer through battles or crises, but through cultural shift, expectation, and a quiet redefinition of what power meant. Systems that had once measured strength by fleet size or age now measured it by adaptability, resilience, and the ability to respond to the unexpected without collapsing. And this shift reshaped institutions across known space. Human academies opened their doors to alien students, not to indoctrinate but to exchange methods of problem-solving, teaching decentralized command thinking, ethical restraint in warfare, and crisis response under uncertainty. These ideas spread unevenly, sometimes clashing with ancient traditions, yet even resistance became part of the transformation, forcing dialogue rather than suppression. Humanity's leaders understood that influence, imposed too quickly, would recreate the same rigid structures they had dismantled, so progress remained deliberate and uneven by design. On Earth, the population adapted to its new role with mixed emotions, pride balanced by exhaustion, awareness growing that leadership carried costs beyond material sacrifice. Entire generations had grown up knowing the galaxy was watching, judging, and often depending on human decisions. This awareness shaped culture, media, and education, emphasizing accountability and long-term thinking, a stark contrast to the short cycles that had once dominated human history. Former Concord species continued to adapt as well, some thriving under new order, others struggling to reconcile autonomy with responsibility. Humanity intervened only when collapse threatened broader stability, preferring mediation to enforcement, and over time this approach reduced resentment rather than inflaming it. Even among those who had once been enemies, the remnants of the old Concord ideology faded as younger generations experienced a reality where cooperation produced tangible benefits. The ancient machine observers remained present at the edges of known space, silent and watchful, their data streams reflecting a galaxy no longer fitting their original models. Human analysts monitored them constantly, not out of fear alone, but curiosity, understanding that coexistence depended on remaining unpredictable without becoming reckless. This balance became humanity's defining challenge, to remain flexible without losing coherence, strong without becoming oppressive, united without erasing diversity. Moments of crisis still emerged, localized conflicts, resource disputes, ideological clashes, but unlike in the past, these rarely escalated beyond control. Mechanisms existed to absorb shock, adapt policy, and correct course. Many of those mechanisms bore the imprint of human experience, lessons learned from centuries of internal conflict now applied. On a galactic scale, as decades passed, Historians began documenting the era not as a conquest, but as a correction, the moment when a dismissed species forced the galaxy to confront its own stagnation. The phrase once spoken in mockery, that humans were chaotic and unreliable, was reinterpreted as a warning. Chaos unmanaged was destruction, but chaos understood and guided was evolution. Humanity's journey became a central case study across worlds, analyzed endlessly, debated fiercely yet rarely dismissed. And through it all, human leadership remained cautious, aware that complacency would undo everything achieved. Preparations for unknown threats continued quietly. Fleets maintained readiness without posturing, research pushed boundaries without abandoning ethics, and diplomacy remained active even where progress seemed impossible. The galaxy had learned to listen when humans spoke, not because of fear, but because history had shown the cost of ignoring them, and as the stars continued their slow, indifferent motion, one truth held steady across civilizations: humanity's true power had never been a single moment of revelation, but a continuous act of becoming, shaped by being underestimated, tested by responsibility, and sustained by the refusal to stop adapting, even when the galaxy believed the story was already finished. As the era shaped by humanity's rise settled into history, the galaxy slowly came to understand the full meaning of what had occurred, not as a sudden overturning of power, but as a long correction to assumptions that had governed interstellar civilization for ages. The mocking laughter that once echoed through Concord chambers became a symbol taught in academies as the sound of decline, the moment arrogance blinded wisdom. Humanity did not build monuments to its victories, nor did it rewrite history to glorify itself. Instead, it preserved records with uncomfortable honesty, documenting mistakes, losses, internal conflict, and near failures, believing that truth was the only safeguard against repeating the past. This transparency became one of humanity's most influential exports, shaping governance models across allied systems. As centuries-old alien hierarchies gradually gave way to adaptive institutions capable of reform rather than collapse, the ancient machine observers, still present at the margins of known space, continued to adjust their long-term models, recording a galaxy that no longer fit deterministic projections. Humanity's influence had introduced variability at a scale that defied simple correction, and this alone altered the machine's purpose, shifting them from execution to observation. A silent acknowledgement that unpredictability guided by restraint was not a flaw, but a stabilizing force. Within human society, life continued with surprising normalcy. People worked, argued, celebrated, and mourned, often unaware of how closely their everyday resilience mirrored the qualities that had changed the fate of the stars. Leaders came and went, policies evolved, and mistakes were made, yet the core lesson endured, that strength without humility led to ruin, and adaptability without ethics led to chaos. When new civilizations eventually emerged beyond the explored frontier, humanity ensured first contact was shaped by patience rather than dominance. Approaching with curiosity and caution, remembering too well what it meant to be dismissed, these encounters reinforced a simple truth that spread quietly across the galaxy, that survival favored those willing to listen as much as act. As time passed, the phrase that once defined humanity in the eyes of the Concord, mocked chaotic, insignificant, lost its power entirely, replaced by a different understanding shared even by former enemies, that humanity's true power was never revealed in a single battle or technological leap, but in a long arc of response to adversity, the refusal to accept imposed limits, and the discipline to wield strength without becoming enslaved by it. The galaxy did not become perfect, nor did conflict disappear, but became resilient, capable of absorbing shock without collapse. And that resilience traced back to the moment humanity was underestimated and chose not to answer with rage alone, but with patience, preparation, and relentless growth. And so the story of humanity's rise ended not with domination, but with balance. A reminder written across the stars that mocking what you do not understand is a first step toward losing everything, and that those who endure being underestimated often become the ones who decide what comes next.